Hey, what's up? I'm Fyrax, and today I wanted to talk about the new French DLC, They Shall Not Pass, that just came out yesterday for Battlefield 1. So first of all, we're going to start talking about the French army and quickly talk about its implication in the war. Then we are going to talk about the new content that was introduced in They Shall Not Pass. And finally, I will end with a short talk about the general feeling I have so far with the couple of hours that I've put into the DLC right now. So I'll let you know if it's a good idea to purchase the DLC right now, or if either you should wait or not buy it at all. With that said, let's get started. So DICE has finally put in the French army into Battlefield 1. This is something that should have been done since day one, but unfortunately it was not. So finally they did it, and now we are able to play with this army. I find it's a little silly that they didn't put the French army in the game in the first place, knowing how big an implication and role they played in the war, and knowing that most of the battles happened on the French territory. But anyways, the French army is finally here. So, to talk about a few statistics, during the war, the total estimated casualties, civilian and military combined, is 38 million. Well, we're not sure, but estimates give us around a 38 million casualty count. Of the 38 million casualties, there were 17 million deaths, 20 million wounded. That is a lot of casualties. So now if we look at strictly the only military deaths, there were an estimated 10 to 11 million deaths throughout the entire war. And the French army represented 1.4 million deaths as well. So that's not a small portion of the war. That's almost a tenth, even more than a tenth of the total amount of deaths during the war. So we can see here that the French army played a huge role in the war. And DICE did admit that it was an error not to put the French army in the first place, so they finally decided to create an entire French-themed DLC to kind of catch up for their mistake. So now that we finally have the French army in the game, let's talk about the new content that is available to us. So first of all, let's look at the new maps that were introduced in this DLC. So 4 new maps were introduced. We have Verdun Heights, Fort Vaux, Soissons, and Rupture. So the first map we have is Verdun Heights, which is kind of a mix between a fort and trench type of warfare, with a devastated landscape and mortar shells everywhere. And it's a fully infantry map, so no vehicles are going to be going around this map. So for all you infantry players out there, this is the map for you. Then there is Fort Vaux, which happens in a big fort, and it's very close quarters oriented combat. Then there's Soissons, which is one of the biggest maps of this expansion, and it really focuses on a mix of infantry combat and vehicle combat, with a huge amount of emphasis on trench warfare. And finally, the last new map that we get is Rupture, which is quite a beautiful map with a whole bunch of poppy flowers everywhere, so the art style is just beautiful. And this is one of the maps with the least amount of trench warfare emphasis. The new maps in Battlefield 1 They Shall Not Pass has a huge emphasis on devastated battlefields and trench warfare, so that should give a more realistic and authentic feel to the battlefield. So on top of these 4 new maps, we get a new game mode which is called Frontlines, which is kind of like a combination between Rush and Conquest. So basically you have a point that you have to capture. If one team captures it, they can move forward in one direction. If the other team captures it, they can move forward in the other direction. And once one team captures enough objective in one direction, they'll eventually get to the end of the map, which has 2 telegraph stations, and then they have to blow it up like in Rush. And I personally tested out this game mode, and I do not like it. I mean, the concept is really cool. It's just that there's a problem with the timer. I played a game and it lasted an hour and 45 minutes, which was just dragging on. It kept on moving backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And of course, this is a realistic representation of World War I, where a lot of the combat wouldn't advance anywhere. A lot of the combat would just be stale, and people would rush out of nowhere get killed, and the front lines wouldn't move for days or maybe even months. So I guess that's a good representation of the actual World War I, but I think there should be an option to be able to activate a timer on this game mode, because an hour and 45 minutes is way too long. But otherwise, besides from this timer problem, the game mode is actually fun, and it doesn't have as much movement as the other type of game modes, but I actually like that because it really gives you that authentic feel of World War I. I mean, of course, it's not going to be completely realistic, but we're getting closer to a more realistic game. So after the inclusion of a new game mode, DICE also gave us 2 new vehicles. So the first one being a heavy tank, so the Saint Chaman tank, which is I believe a 4-man tank, which it's a 5-man tank. And then there's the introduction of a new behemoth, the Char 2C tank, which actually never saw service in World War II, but was at the time the biggest tank ever created. And this behemoth changes compared to the other type of behemoths that we've seen before, because it's very mobile, but on top of that, it's directly in the combat. You can push up directly on a point with it. But I wouldn't recommend doing that because it can get taken down very quickly. It does require quite a bit of skill to completely use this tank effectively. DICE also added 6 new weapons in the game, so 2 for the Assault class, 1 for the Medic class, 1 for the Support class, and 1 for the Scout class, and finally 1 new weapon for the tank and airplane pilots. I did manage to unlock one of the new weapons, the Shoshaw, which is a semi-automatic rifle, and it's a 2-shot kill in close quarter combat. So this is the semi-automatic rifle for the Medic class. So in close quarters, it's a 2-shot kill, which is pretty effective, but it only has 6 rounds in the magazine and it has a very low rate of fire. So you have to be very skilled to use this weapon effectively. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to test any of the other weapons because I didn't unlock them. And by the way, you unlock these weapons by completing assignments, kind of like the unlock systems for Battlefield 4, where you have to do a certain amount of things, so get kills, revives, heals, etc., to complete the mission and unlock the new weapon. And to finish off with the new content that's been put in the game, we have a new stationary weapon, some new puzzle melee weapons that you can work towards, and some new skins for all of the new weapons, which are all French, by the way. So, should you get this DLC? Well, if you're already a premium member, you already have access to it and are going to get access to all of the DLCs. But let's say you wanted to wait and see how this DLC turned out. Well, if you're going to buy it, you should buy it now before the player count starts dropping off because of the paywall behind this DLC. People generally buy the DLC, they'll play it for about a month or 2, and then people generally stop using the DLC because the amount of servers running these maps and game modes kind of tails off within a period of 1 or 2 months. At least that's how it's been for every other expansion in Battlefield 4 and 3. So if you're going to get it, you should get it now before servers rarely use and play the maps anymore. Otherwise, the expansion is fun. I've put in maybe 5 hours so far into the expansion, and the maps are beautiful. Yes, it's high quality production, of course. The new game mode is fun, but like I said, they need to put a timer so that there is an actual end, because I think that if none of the teams actually end up getting to the final objective, the game will just keep running and running and running and running. So that they need to fix. So yes, I do think you should buy this DLC. I mean, especially with the lack of content in the base game, this can only improve things. So yes, buy it if you have the money. And finally, the last thing that you should know is that with this new DLC came a patch that's going to affect everyone, whether or not you bought this DLC. So I'm not going to give you a complete list of the patch notes, but there's 2 things that I noticed. So first of all, I feel like the hip fire from weapons has been improved so that they're way more accurate when firing from the hip. I don't know if this is for all the weapons, but I do find that many of the new weapons have better accuracy when firing from the hip. And then the second thing, which I don't know why DICE did this, Grenades are now auto-replenishing, which means after a 36 seconds or something like that period, you will get a new grenade if you have already thrown it. So that means that you no longer need to go to a support player and get an ammo pack to get new grenades. So this has only increased the amount of grenade spam even more than it already was. So I'm hoping DICE will realize the huge mistake that they made and will patch this very shortly. I honestly think that half of my deaths during the 5-hour trial period of the DLC were caused by grenades, which is just insane. The amount of grenades flying on the battlefield is huge, and they need to fix that quickly. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you liked this video and it was helpful, and please subscribe for more weekly content. I will try to post weekly, and if you haven't already checked out my other content, please feel free to do so. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.